Imagine a battlefield where thousands of soldiers move like a single organism. No gaps, no panic, just discipline. This was the phalanx formation, and it changed the way wars were fought in the ancient world. In ancient Greece, especially among Spartan and Macedonian armies, soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in a tight rectangular block. Each man carried a shield and a long spear. Their shields overlapped, locking together to form a human wall. From the front, this wasn't an army. It looked like a moving fortress. When enemies charged, they didn't face men. They faced a forest of spears. Breaking through was nearly impossible. The real strength of the phalanx wasn't just weapons, it was unity. If one soldier broke formation, the entire line could collapse. That's why training was brutal. Soldiers were taught to protect the formation more than their own lives. This formation helped Greek forces survive massive invasions during the Persian Wars. Its true power was unleashed by one man, Alexander the Great. He transformed the phalanx from a defensive wall into an offensive weapon. The infantry locked the enemy in place, while cavalry units attacked from the sides. The enemy couldn't react fast enough. They were trapped, surrounded, and crushed. At battles like Issus and Gaugamela, smaller Macedonian forces defeated massive empires. Not because they were stronger, but because they were organized. The phalanx proved one timeless rule of warfare. Wars are not won by strength alone. They are won by coordination. When 1,000 soldiers fight with one mind, they stop being an army and become a weapon. Rome didn't conquer the world because it had the biggest army. Rome conquered the world because it had the smartest formation. This was the manipular formation, a system that turned Roman soldiers into one of the most adaptable fighting forces in history. Before Rome, most armies fought in rigid blocks. They moved slowly, struggled on uneven terrain, collapsed when formations broke. The Romans changed that. Instead of one massive line, they divided their army into smaller units called maniples. Each maniple could move independently, rotate, retreat, or attack without breaking the entire army's structure. This meant the battlefield was no longer a straight fight. It became a flexible machine. The front line got tired, another unit replaced it. If the enemy attacked from the side, maniples shifted instantly. If terrain was rough or chaotic, Roman soldiers adapted instead of collapsing. This formation became Rome's greatest weapon during the Punic Wars against Carthage, especially against the legendary general Hannibal. Hannibal had larger forces, war elephants, and brilliant tactics. But Roman flexibility kept them alive. Even after devastating losses like the Battle of Cannae, Rome didn't break. They adjusted, reorganized, and came back stronger because their formation allowed learning and adaptation. The manipular system proved something revolutionary. A rigid army can win battles. A flexible army wins wars. Rome wasn't unbeatable because of strength. It was unbeatable because it could change faster than its enemies. Soldiers weren't just standing in line anymore. They were thinking, moving, rotating, like parts of a living engine. And that engine didn't just defend Rome, it built an empire that ruled for centuries. Alexander the Great didn't just fight battles, engineered them. His deadliest tactic was known as the hammer and anvil, a formation that trapped enemies and crushed them from two sides at once. Here's how it worked. At the center stood the Macedonian phalanx, heavily armored infantry holding long spears. Their job wasn't to destroy the enemy, it was to hold them in place. They became the anvil. Once the enemy was locked in front, Alexander launched his fastest weapon, cavalry. Elite horsemen charged from the sides, striking weak points, creating chaos, breaking morale. They became the hammer, and when the hammer struck, enemy had nowhere to go. Front blocked, sides collapsing, formation shattered. This wasn't random fighting. It was controlled destruction. Alexander used this tactic in some of the most legendary battles in history, including Issus and Gaugamela against the Persian Empire. In both battles, he faced armies much larger than his own. More soldiers, more resources, more territory, but size didn't matter. The Persian forces were pushed forward by the phalanx, then slammed from the side by cavalry at full speed. Commanders lost control, lines broke, panic spread, and once panic begins in an army, defeat becomes inevitable. The hammer and anvil proved a powerful truth. Wars aren't won by attacking harder. They're won by attacking smarter. Alexander didn't rely on strength alone. He relied on timing, positioning, and coordination. He turned his army into a trap. And once the enemy stepped inside that trap, there was no escape. Armies in history fought face to face. Mongols fought from everywhere. Their deadliest battlefield system was the Horse Archer Swarm, a fast, fluid formation that didn't look like a formation at all. It looked like chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Every Mongol soldier was a trained horse archer. They could ride at full speed, turn, shoot, and disappear, all within seconds. Instead of standing in lines, they spread across the battlefield. They attacked from multiple directions, never staying still long enough to be hit. And their most terrifying tactic? The feigned retreat. Mongol forces would pretend to panic, turn their backs, and run. The enemy, thinking they had won, would chase them. That's when the trap closed. Hidden Mongol units would surround from the sides. Horse archers would rain arrows from every direction. The chasing army suddenly became the hunted one. This strategy destroyed powerful empires across Asia and Europe. Cities fell, kingdoms collapsed, armies vanished. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongols didn't just win battles, they rewrote warfare itself. Traditional armies relied on strength, armor, and formation lines. The Mongols relied on speed, communication, and fear. They could travel farther, strike faster, and disappear before enemies could respond. And when enemies finally prepared to fight, the Mongols were already attacking somewhere else. Horse Archer Swarm proved one brutal reality. The fastest army controls the war. You can't defeat what you can't catch. You can't defend what you can't predict. By the time enemies understood the Mongol strategy, it was already too late. The medieval knight once ruled the battlefield. Heavy armor, war horses, shock charges. But then, gunpowder arrived, and with it came one of the most revolutionary formations in military history, pike and shot formation. This wasn't just a new tactic. It was the bridge between medieval warfare and the modern battlefield. Here's how it worked. At the center stood rows of pikemen, soldiers carrying massive 15 to 18-foot pikes. Their job was simple: stop cavalry. If armored knights charged, they ran directly into a forest of steel. Horses refused to push forward. Charges collapsed instantly. But pikes alone weren't enough. So mixed within these blocks were musketeers, soldiers armed with early firearms. While pikemen held the line, musketeers fired volleys into the enemy ranks. After firing, they stepped back to reload. Another row stepped forward. It was rhythm: fire, step back, reload, step forward. The formation combined defense and offense in one system. This tactic dominated European battlefields during the 16th and 17th centuries, especially in conflicts like the 30 Years' War. Traditional knights became obsolete. Armies that refused to adapt were crushed. The pike and shot formation proved a turning point. Technology changes warfare, but only if you build strategy around it. It wasn't the musket alone that won wars. It was the coordination between steel and gunpowder. Infantry became the true king of the battlefield. Cavalry no longer controlled the outcome, and from that moment forward, war would never again belong to armor and swords. It belonged to fire and formation. By the late 18th century, warfare was changing fast. Armies were bigger, battlefields were louder, speed mattered more than ever, and one man mastered this new style of war: Napoleon Bonaparte. His signature battlefield system was the column formation, simple in appearance but devastating in execution. Instead of spreading soldiers into long, thin lines, Napoleon organized them into deep, tightly packed columns that could move quickly across the battlefield. These columns marched fast, they carried momentum, and most importantly, they carried morale. Soldiers felt stronger moving forward together in a mass, not standing exposed in thin lines. When the moment came, these columns slammed into weak points in the enemy line, breaking formations through sheer pressure and aggression. Behind them, artillery fired to weaken defenses. Light infantry spread out to protect the flanks. It was coordinated, fast, and overwhelming. Napoleon used this system across Europe, from Italy to Austria to Prussia, defeating armies that relied on older, rigid tactics. Traditional forces struggled to respond. They were too slow to reposition, too stiff to adapt. Column formation turned movement into a weapon, but its real power wasn't just speed. It was psychology. Seeing thousands of soldiers advancing in a dense mass, drums beating, flags raised, it shook enemy morale before the fight even began. Lines broke, commands failed, fear spread. And once fear spreads in an army, collapse follows. Napoleon proved a critical lesson of warfare. Victory doesn't always belong to the strongest force. It belongs to the force that moves faster, hits harder, and believes it cannot lose. Column wasn't just a formation. It was momentum turned into strategy. World War I was slow, defensive, and stuck in trenches. World War II began the exact opposite way. Fast, aggressive, unstoppable. This was Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war. A formation built on one idea: strike so fast that the enemy never gets the chance to react. Instead of sending infantry first, Germany attacked with speed and coordination. Tanks led the assault. Motorized infantry followed behind. Aircraft attacked from above. Everything moved at once. Communication units relayed real-time information. Commanders adjusted instantly. Attacks didn't happen in lines. They happened in waves. The goal wasn't just to fight the enemy army. The goal was to break their ability to respond. Tanks smashed through weak points in defenses. Aircraft bombed roads, supply lines, and communication centers. Infantry secured captured territory before resistance could form. Armies didn't get time to regroup. This strategy shocked the world during the invasion of Poland in 1939, even more during the fall of France in 1940. France had one of the strongest militaries in Europe. Heavy defenses, fortified lines, experienced soldiers. But Blitzkrieg didn't attack where defenses were strongest. It struck where they were weakest, fast and relentlessly. Within weeks, entire defensive systems collapsed. Commanders lost control. Units became isolated. Panic spread faster than orders. The battlefield was no longer about holding ground. It was about movement. Blitzkrieg proved a terrifying new rule of modern warfare. Speed can be more deadly than strength. If an army moves fast enough, communicates clearly enough, and strikes hard enough, the enemy doesn't lose because they are weaker. They lose because they never get the chance to fight back. Modern wars are no longer won by the biggest army on the battlefield. They're won by the army that sees everything, connects everything, and strikes with precision. This is the air-ground battle doctrine, the foundation of modern warfare used by advanced militaries, especially the United States and NATO. Instead of fighting as separate forces, air power and ground troops operate as one coordinated system. Satellites detect movement, drones monitor targets, aircraft strike from above, artillery fires from miles away. Ground troops move in only when the battlefield is already weakened. Every unit is connected through real-time communication. Commanders don't guess anymore. They see the battlefield live. During the Gulf War in 1991, this doctrine showed its true power. Coalition forces didn't begin with a massive ground invasion. They began with air superiority. For weeks, aircraft destroyed radar systems, supply routes, command centers, and armored divisions from the sky. By the time ground forces advanced, the enemy was already disoriented and weakened. Battles that once took months were decided in days. Because the war wasn't fought soldier versus soldier anymore, it was fought system versus system. The air-ground doctrine proved a defining truth of modern conflict. Information is now the most powerful weapon. The army that sees first strikes first. The army that communicates faster moves faster, and the army that coordinates every force into one network dominates the battlefield. Modern soldiers are no longer fighting alone. They fight with satellites above them, aircraft behind them, and intelligence guiding every step. And in this new era of warfare, victory doesn't belong to numbers. It belongs to precision.